Welcome to the theory notes for SITXFSA005 Use hygienic practices for food safety. I'm Chef Christian, and today we're going through some really important information, and certainly information that I am quite passionate. Do we say passionate? Or do we say particular about? And the reason for that is because I don't like food poisoning. And I know that a lot of people don't like food poisoning. And so this is a fundamental unit that discusses, um, I guess, the health and hygiene requirements that you as a food handler need to be aware of. So we go through training to create an awareness of the specific requirements that we need to um, um, complete our jobs daily. So straight into it. The Australian New Zealand Food Standards Code is a system that guides us, right? Guides us in the principles around standards for food, for production, development, delivery, labeling, all specific requirements. Okay. We talk about contaminants, and we've got contamination, and um, certain specifics around there. And these are all definitions. Um, and that's how legislation and codes sort of start off their information is around definitions, right? So we talk about a contaminant being any biological or chemical agent, foreign matter, or other substance that may compromise food safety or the suitability. So then we get to contamination, and the definition of contamination is when there is the introduction or occurrence of a contaminant in food. That's where we would talk about um, some product, some food being contaminated, right? That's contaminated because it has a contaminant in it. That's where the differences are, right? So contamination of food has occurred if any contaminant is present in the food. And that last one there is quite particular as well. Food Standards Code talks about potentially hazardous foods, okay? And potentially hazardous foods um, um, is defined by food that has to be kept at certain temperatures to minimize the growth of any pathogenic microorganisms that may be present in the food or to prevent the formation of toxins in the food. Okay, so a few definitions there. In general, we talk about three types of contaminations. We group them into these three groups. Okay, biological is one of them, microbiological, and what's classified within that group is bacterias, viruses, molds, fungi, yeasts, bugs, germs of salmonella. Right, there's some examples there. Okay. Our second classification or grouping is chemical contamination. And what we're talking about with chemical contamination is cleaning products or cleaning agents, okay, um, pesticides and chemical residue from fruit and vegetables, pest and fly control chemicals or vermin control, poison, some lubricants used to oil certain parts of certain pieces of kitchen equipment, right? So sometimes you see this on kitchen aids and you see it on slicing machines as well, where you have to add a machine oil so that it doesn't break down the metals. If that oil, which actually has metal particles through it as well, and I've seen this a couple of times when making meringue, and I'm like, why is my meringue going grey? What's all these bits going into my meringue? It's actually lubricant. Too much lubricant has been used, and then it's mixing with the metal parts, metal particles, right? And then insecticides is in there as well. And insecticides are part of pest and fly control chemicals. And then the third sort of grouping or classification there is physical contaminations. Okay, and what we're talking about, or foreign objects even, right? So what we're talking about there with foreign objects or physical contamination is it might be rubber bands, right? It might be string, it might be paper clips, glass, hair, pieces of hair, the pest droppings, right? So something physical. I mean, pest droppings is probably, and a lot of those things could even lead on to chemical or biological contamination as well. But I've got a story for you about rubber bands. I remember this function that we did once. One of the customers found a rubber band in their food, in their sauce. And what that was from was our when we used to make our sauces, our veal jus, our reduction sauces. Um, I used to throw in whole bundles of herbs, right? So, um, and because my consideration there was that our sauce was going to be strained through two strainers. It was going to be strained through a chinois and then strained through a fine chinois. So for this rubber band to get through both of those strainings was, you know, a once in a lifetime occurrence in my mind, um, and or just wouldn't happen. But now, I always take the rubber bands off when I put those herbs through my sauces. But anyway, that's it's a physical contamination. So there is the potential there for contamination to occur. Moving on, so potentially hazardous foods. We talked about that earlier. That was those foods that have to be kept at certain temperatures to minimize the growth of or prevent the formation of toxins. A few, um, in fact, there's quite a few things there, right, that have the potential to be hazardous. Chicken, certainly, really high. Chicken, meat, fish, seafood, dairy, um, raw foods, cooked rice and pasta, processed soybean products, and then other products as well that have those protein-rich foods inside them. Okay. Um, Particularly, we talk about ready-to-eat foods as well being potentially hazardous because there is the opportunity there for people to use their hands without PPE, without gloves, to be handling those foods, or even the juice or the smells from other foods to get into foods. Later on in other subjects, we talk about placement of foods in the fridge. And if we've got ready to eat foods, they always go on the top shelves, right? And that way there's no potential for raw chicken juice, for example, to drip onto the sandwiches. Okay, so that's a point to consider and that we talk about later on. Moving on, we talk about employer responsibilities, right, under legislation. And certainly in the standards code, and there's a list of points there. Um, so, in a business, we talk about the PCBU, and I'll talk about what that means later, but it's the person conducting a business undertaking. So we talk more about that in WHS, but the employer has responsibilities and the food handlers have responsibilities. So everyone is responsible. Okay. Employers are responsible for providing a food premises that is compliant with the code, right? So fundamentally, the employer is responsible for that. The employer is responsible for preparing and submitting a food safety plan program to the local council for approval and having it approved. Um, the employer is responsible for appointing a suitably qualified and experienced food safety supervisor, or and currently the requirement is that there needs to be a food safety supervisor on site all the time. The responsibility is to employ food handling staff with appropriate knowledge and skills relevant to their individual food handling role, to implement and record implementation of the approved food safety program, and to take action necessary to prevent food becoming contaminated. So that second last one there is interesting, in that, or certainly something to note. It's not enough to just have a food safety program. It's You have to be demonstrating that you are following it, right? And that's everything from induction to training, uh, pest control, a whole lot of things. All right, we'll talk about more about that later. But it certainly points that the council and the EHO, they come out and um, they check at random times, or even if there have been complaints, and they will want to see how you're following the food safety program. Um, Food handler responsibilities. So, the employer responsibilities associated with hygienic food practices. And who do we report to? Who do we report these breaches to and how? Um, so, food handlers must take all reasonable measures not to handle food or food services in a way as likely to compromise the safety and suitability of food. Right. So that's a broad scope term, right? And that points to everything from having clean uniforms to washing your hands to clean shoes, non-slip shoes, washing your hair, wearing hats. That particular phrase there, food handler must take all reasonable measures not to handle food or food services in a way that are likely to compromise the safety and suitability of food. That really can be used to uh, um, uh, point specifically to any number of hygiene issues. Any food handler with symptoms or a diagnosis of an illness, such as vomiting, diarrhea, or fever, must report that they are ill to their employer or supervisor, at making a record of the dates. Not handle food if there is a reasonable likelihood of food contamination as a result of the illness. If continuing to engage in other work on the food premises, take all practicable measures to prevent food from being contaminated. Cease work as soon as illness symptoms appear and notify a supervisor immediately. Use appropriate first aid measures such as food grade bandages, and notify a supervisor if they know or suspect they may have contaminated food. And it goes on, okay? Maintaining personal hygiene. We need to ensure that we don't eat, sneeze, blow, cough, spit, or smoke around food or food surfaces. Take all practicable measures to prevent unnecessary contact with ready-to-eat food. Tie back long hair and take all practical measures to prevent hair contaminating food. Ensure clothing is clean. Cover bandages and dressings on exposed parts of the body with a waterproof covering. Remove loose jewelry and avoid wearing jewelry on hands and wrists. All right, so these are all specifics of personal hygiene. And the last little point there, I guess, talks about there's a bit more information about hand washing, right? So we need to adhere to the requirements of the approved food safety program for the business. Hand washing and sanitation practices, maintaining required personal hygiene and follow PPE practices. Um, Take preventative action to avoid cross-contamination of food and food contact surfaces. Ensure cooked foods are thoroughly cooked. Obtain necessary training, cleaning and sanitizing food equipment and areas, using the correct practices, and recording food safety practices on nominated forms in the food safety program. Right? So quite a lot of um, you know requirements there. Okay. And again, I go back to what I said right at the beginning. It's all about preventing instances of you know, potentially hazardous incidents. Certainly, food poisoning is a disaster to businesses. Okay. Food safety programs, right? So, three reasons a food business needs to have an approved food safety program. I've got six there for you, or five. Um, we need it to obtain or maintain registration as a business with a local council. We need it to meet legally imposed compliance obligations. We need it to optimize the potential of the food we sell or, or service, being safe and fit for human consumption. As a means of proving that correct, safe food handling practices were adhered to, and to protect the public health and its business reputation. Now, all of that is really specific, but what it comes down to is we don't want to give people food poisoning. And it's really easy to do just by not washing your hands or, putting rubber bands in food or, using food has bacteria in it. Really easy to do. Right. So 10 inclusions that will be found in a food safety program. Mhm. Right. And every food business should have this. There should be a maintenance program, an approved supplier program, a good food handling practices list of information, cleaning and sanitation program, pest control program, personal hygiene program, product recall program, staff training program, calibration program, internal audit program, and a document and data control program with food safety records that need to be maintained. Okay, good list. If your workplace doesn't have it, it'd be a great opportunity for you to implement it. Let's talk about the Food Authority and local council. So two different levels of government there, but also both relate to. I mean, every level of government has specific uh, legislation requirements around food safety. You know, the federal government create the sort of the standards and legislation. Food Authority monitor it across the food chain. So Australia's first and only wholly integrated through chain food regulatory agency is responsible for regulating and monitoring food safety across the entire food industry supply chain from paddock to plate. Food Authority plays a vital role in protecting the health and well-being of the people in New South Wales through those 4 points. Okay, mitigating food safety risks, rapidly responding in the event of a food safety incident, providing education training and improving the clarity and accessibility of food information. Local council, on the flip side to that, they're the ones that monitor food safety programs for certain food businesses, and certainly they are the ones that come out and inspect the business as well to see that everything's being done properly. Okay, so both have particular roles there. Um, yeah, there's consequences for not following these things as well. Okay, and if the EHO comes out, this is where you find out about it, and this is where your boss will be coming, going, "What's going on?" You get warning letters with an intention for remedy to fix the breach or the deficiency, penalty notice on the spot fines, listing in the name and shame register. Right, so you can go and have a look at that. Type in New South Wales Food Authority name and shame, and then have a look at some of the food businesses around your area. Binding orders to undertake nominated work for compliance. The authorities can come and shut the business, and then even prosecution in court, right, including fines. So that's quite serious, and it can be very detrimental to a business when things are notified like this. What about an employee, you ask, right? So the employee has can have consequences as well. Right? It could be an informal, verbal, knowledge-based advice provided by management. Could be retraining or coaching on the job. Maybe a requirement to refresh a food handler certificate training. Formal verbal warning for repeated non-compliance. Formal written warning for continued non-compliance, and then even dismissal after that. Okay, so some pretty serious stuff there for both the business and the employee. Okay, and the reason for that are the consequences for the customer, right? Food poisoning symptoms could include nausea, vomiting, abdominal cramps, diarrhea, lethargy, which is just overall tiredness, fever, sweating, or even death. Okay, serious stuff. Let's talk about some examples of health issues likely to be hygiene risks. Common cold can be a risk, yeah, really easy to transfer to someone. Influenza, yep, chickenpox, measles, mumps, tuberculosis, diphtheria, and others. Okay. So, chances are if you get that from someone, well, it's not chances are, you can get it from anywhere. You get it from touching the handrail on the train, get it from touching the handrail on the escalator. All it takes is one person with germs to touch something, and you then touch that, and you've got that as well. It's no laughing matter, right? Certainly, laughing is one way that airborne diseases may be spread by food handlers. Right? Coughing, sneezing, blowing nose, laughing, talking, throat clearing, direct transmission. Right? So coughing or sneezing onto the food. Indirect transmission is where you cough or sneeze onto a food contact surface, and then you lay down sandwiches bread to make sandwiches. All of a sudden, someone's got that. Right? And the last one is makeup, right? So wearing makeup that may contain bacteria can cause viral skin infections in your face or your hands. Yeah, so it's something you need to be aware of. In general, in the kitchen, we talk about not wearing makeup. Um, so some further examples, right, of how foodborne diseases can cause food poisoning. So food poisoning occurs through the ingestion of food that is contaminated by sufficiently sized colonies of food poisoning bacteria, such as Salmonella, Campylobacter, Listeria monocytogenes, Cryptosporidium, Giardia, E. coli, Clostridium perfringens, Bacillus cereus, Staphylococcus aureus. There are some serious bacterias, right? Some of which, can cause mild nausea and others which can cause death. And they all come from different things. Right, moving on to infectious diseases that can be transferred. Norovirus, typhoid, salmonellosis, listeria, hepatitis A, cholera. Right, really easy for these things to be transferred. Okay. So, what actions can we take to avoid foodborne illness? We can purchase only from approved and registered suppliers, so that comes back to our approved suppliers form. Check food for problems when it's delivered prior to acceptance into the venue. I got to work the other day and there was a bag of flour on the bench, had a hole in it. I lifted it up, flour came out. I called them up and said, you got to take this back. Rotate stock using first in, first out principles, right? FIFO, talk about that later. Store high risk food at correct temperatures, right? So frozen food should be below minus 18 degrees. Refrigerated high risk food should be at or below 5 degrees. And hot high risk food should be at or above 60, right? So you can see there, high risk foods need to be either under 5 or above 60. And that's because we talk about the danger zone. And when I talk about the danger zone, I'm not talking about that awesome Kenny Loggins song. I'm talking about the temperature danger zone, right? That's the temperature range between 5 and 60, which is where bacteria has the opportunity to multiply exponentially. We can wash hands as and when required and implement required hygienic cleaning programs for the items and areas. So they're all examples of how to avoid um, foodborne illnesses, actions that we can take. There's a few more here that we can have a look at. Cook high-risk food properly. Right. So we talk about 75 degrees. 75 takes 75 degrees to kill salmonella is the current legislation. So take it to 75, above 75 for 1 minute, and you're going to be pretty safe. We can control and eliminate pests from food areas. We can implement proper personal hygiene protocols. Talk about that, plain clothes, no smoking in food areas, no jewelry on hands, wear a hairnet, wear appropriate food handling, disposable gloves, and change regularly and when required. Throw out food that exceeds the 2-hour, 4-hour rule. Discard food that exceeds the 2-step rule for the cooling of hot, high-risk food. Avoid cross-contamination, such as changing knives, etc., in between handling raw, high-risk food and cooked, ready-to-eat items. Do not mix different batches of food and only reheat cooked food once and then discard it if it's not used. Yeah. Okay, let that sink in. That's a lot of information, right? But all these points are things that we need to be considering in our daily working schedule tasks, right? So it's a lot to consider and it's a lot to remember as well. But it should be something that we're always focusing on, and it certainly should be something that our supervisor are always monitoring and supporting us in doing. Okay. With that, let's talk about proper hand washing procedure. Okay. So when we talk about hand washing procedures, there are certain things that we need to have. So what we need to have there is we need to have a dedicated sink for hand washing, right? So legislation says that there should be three, the recommendation is that there should be three different sinks in any food handling business. There should be a food wash sink, a dishwash sink, and a hand wash sink. And they're not interchangeable, right? So you need a dedicated hand wash sink. You need soap for hand washing. You need disposable paper towel. You need warm running water, and you need a bin, right? And then the last thing is sanitizer. Okay, so the proper hand washing procedure should be you wet your hands first, then you take some soap and you lather your hands up, and you rub them vigorously together for 20 seconds. Okay, clean under the nails, in the folds of the skin, up and around the wrists, using a nail brush to help remove dirt. Rinse soap off using running water, warm running water. Shake the excess water from your hands into the sink. Right, we don't stand there and start flicking it at people. Dry it first with a disposable paper towel, and then you can finish under a hot air dryer if needs be. Last thing would be sanitizer. Okay, yeah. My hands over the years have been destroyed. The amount of times I wash my hands. Every time I work at a different place, there's a different soap, which leads to a different abrasion on my skin, which is terrible. So that's the process, okay? And part of the performance requirements for this unit are that you provide a video of yourself performing that demonstration, right? In as per that procedure. let's talk about um, instances where you will or are required to wash your hands before entering a food handling area. Okay, you should wash your hands before you start work, uh, on arrival, or certainly with a new job. So when you're recommencing work, before handling cooked or ready to eat foods, after handling raw high risk foods to prevent cross contamination. Um, yeah, after smoking, after coughing or sneezing, after blowing your nose, after eating or drinking, after touching your hair, scalp, or a wound, after using the toilet, handling money or using point of sale terminals, and after handling cleaning products and chemicals. Okay, now that's really important when you think about it. I remember seeing, I was working at a place over Christmas, and I remember seeing one of the junior chefs. He put some gloves on, and then he um, started, he was making sandwiches, started making a prawn sandwich. So he was touching raw prawns. Then he wiped his gloves on his tea towel behind his back, and then he picked up some chicken and he started working with the chicken. And then he wiped his hands on the tea towel behind his back. And then he picked up an egg and he cut the egg, put that onto the salad. And then he wiped his hands on the back of his thing, and then he mixed up the salad, put it in a plate, and served both the plates. So the first one was a prawn sandwich. Second one was a chicken Caesar salad. Both, and then as soon as he was done, he went and washed his hands, washed his gloves. So, uh, um, there's two things there, right? Yes, we should be focusing on gloves are great, but they're only great if they're used properly. Okay. Some personal hygiene that we need to focus on um, at all times. Okay. Showering. So we should be showering um, daily. Okay. With warm to hot water, lather soap at least once a day. Wash your hair with shampoo at least every few days. Brush and floss your teeth twice a day. Use antiperspirant, which kills bacteria. Ensure your hands and fingernails are always clean and sanitized. Ensure makeup worn is not excessive. And cover or remove piercings using workplace appropriate bandages. Okay. Um, oh, let's talk about I guess the reasons why food handlers need to wash their hands. Um, just going back, is it's all about cross contamination. Right? The way we avoid cross contamination was those points before. Okay, so when handling raw high risk foods, after smoking, after coughing or sneezing, after blowing your nose, eating or drinking, touching your hair, it's all about avoiding cross contamination. Okay, moving right along. Let's see how we go. So, um, some generic examples of major causes of food contamination and foodborne illness. Right. So, the fundamental for me is that number three, poor personal hygiene practices. Okay. Um, yeah, so that's one of them. I mean, ultimately, our food might be contaminated where we purchase it from. It could be sick, people that are sick and they're handling, preparing, or serving food. I mean, that comes down to poor personal hygiene practices, really. Failure of cooked high risk food to reach required cooking temperatures. Right. So, think about before you go and buy a pie from the local service station. Think about how long it may have been there, or certainly who's monitoring the temperatures of them. Failure to keep high risk food out of the temperature danger zone. Yeah, Kenny Loggins again. Incorrect storage of raw ingredients and or um, cooked and ready to eat items. Failure to wash hands as and when required. Accidental inclusion of chemicals in food, so not washing our fruit and vegetables or storing cleaning agents in the food containers area. even failure to discard or recall foods suspected of being contaminated. Okay. Okay, so some workplace hygiene issues that may be found when working with food contact surfaces. We might find physical items lying on surfaces which are not noticed and become incorporated into the food that is produced serves. Where pests and rodents may have contaminated the surfaces prior to them being used for food preparation. Raw high-risk food may have previously been on the surface and the surface may not have been properly cleaned and sanitized before other food is placed on it. And employees may have coughed or sneezed onto the surface and it has not been properly cleaned and sanitized before other food is placed on it. Okay, several points there where, contact surfaces can be an issue. Yeah, so then we talk about inclusions. And I guess what we're looking at there is some more things that may be included in procedures, right? So food safety procedures, and we're specifically talking about sort of SOPs there, right? So standard operating procedures, the requirement for the food safety program to be adhered to, as an example. The appointment of a food safety supervisor is an example. Identification of the qualification required before anyone can handle food is an example of a procedure, and so on. So protocols that apply to food receiving, storing, preparation, display, service, and disposal. Methods of food hazard control for each critical critical control point. Systematic monitoring of hazard controls and record keeping. Personal hygiene, suitable dress, and personal protective equipment and clothing to be used. Record maintenance. Corrective actions to be taken when hazards are found. Or not being under control, pest control, cleaning and sanitation, and equipment and facility maintenance. So much information, very, very compliance and regulatory based, which is so much information to remember. But, anyway, as I said earlier, it's really important. So some examples of safe food handling practices an employee who's responsible for receiving food in the premises might have. So approved suppliers, that's sort of come up a couple of different times, right? Check that we're using an approved supplier. Check the cleanliness of food delivery vehicles. Check personal practices of food delivery person. Check the use by date and best before dates of deliveries. Check temperature of food to ensure within requirements according to type of food. Check time food has been out of the danger zone. Yeah, talk about danger zone. I love it. Kenny Loggins. Inspect deliveries for damaged products and or packaging and wrapping. Reject unsafe food. Rotate food when placing it into storage. Take action to prevent food from being contaminated and separate food from chemicals. Yeah, so that's just on receiving foods, right? Some of those delivery drivers, they are revolting. Right, so hygiene issues for takeaway foods. So talking about service, responsible service for dishing up takeaway foods. And it's funny, this always makes me think of the salad bars of the 90s. I saw something recently that said in the early 80s or 70s, Pizza Hut were the used like 90% of or 98% of all businesses using kale was Pizza Hut. And it was because they used to use it in their salad bar to make their salad bar look more presentable. Didn't go in the salads or anything, just for presentation. It's quite amusing. This one, takeaway foods, is all about monitoring temperatures basically, and stock control. So we're talking about keeping an eye on danger zone temperatures, 60 degrees, anything being discarded after that, Don't mix batches in bain-maries. Make sure the bain-maries are hot when you're putting hot food into them. Use separate utensils to avoid that cross-contamination. Protect food from flies. Use packaging and wrapping materials suitable for the items being served. Don't reuse single-use items. Protect wrapping and packing from contamination. Don't blow into a bag. Um, um, yeah, we don't lick fingers to separate paper. Um, um, yeah, and certainly monitoring our display records, right? Um, Maybe we might also want to ensure all surfaces, containers, and equipment are clean and product specific. We're almost there. Last couple of ones just talk about pest control and effective pest control. When we talk about this three-step process for pest control, which is build them out, which is physical exclusion. And what that means is, um, if we monitor the workplace and ensure there's no way for pests to come in, or to the best we can, right? And that means silicon sealing everywhere, having tiles that come sort of all the way up the wall, making sure there's no holes in the wall. We're building them out. Chasing them out means we use chemicals or mechanical methods to chase them out, and starve them out, which means we don't leave food out. We don't leave things out that are going to attract them, right? Build them out, chase them out, starve them out. Cool. And then just this last one talks about cleaning of food equipment, right? So if we remove food from the areas before cleaning, yeah, we're ensuring that we're not going to have any chemical contamination. Get rid of any food that's known or suspected to have been contaminated. Clean using equipment and chemicals as stated in the food safety program. Only use cleaning gear color coded for dedicated for use in the kitchen. Dilute and apply chemicals according to manufacturer instructions. Rinse detergents and chemicals off after use. Clean under pieces of equipment. Clean all food equipment, items and areas that have been used for food preparation. Wash hands after cleaning and or handling chemicals, and leave areas clean and dry to deprive pests of nutrition and water. All right. Cool. So much information, and I feel like I've spoken really fast, but you can go back through YouTube and you can slow it down and listen to me talk slower, or if you need to, you can pause and rewind it. That's the beauty of these tools right now, here and there. But right now, I want to thank you for listening to me jibber jabber and yammer on about SITXFSA005 Use hygienic practices for food safety. I'm Chef Christian. See you next time.